Hey, so I thought I'd give an update video because I'm going to be away for a little while. I'm going back to the Monastic Academy in Vermont for at least a few months, so I won't be updating or putting out any videos. And thought I'd just share some thoughts that I've been ruminating on related to the Metacrisis and how to respond to what's going on in the world. And the thing that comes up most for me is, there's two kinds of people. People that say there's two kinds of people that realize it's more complicated than that. But if you do go with a framing of, okay, say you categorize that people kind of see the way of the world right now and they'll either buy into it, say it's game A, or, in order to make a living, and no judgments really on that. You might be able to provide for yourself and work in the game A world to some extent, and good. Or you're like, you know what, I'm really concerned with the state of the world. I want to figure out what it's going to take to change things. But for any dire situation, whether you're on the Titanic or, a tsunami's on its way, you got to gauge what's realistically achievable. And I feel like that's what I see lacking the most. People don't want to give up, and they're not willing to consider that it's already a foregone conclusion in terms of having already passed planetary boundaries, and the kind of change that's necessary is so deep. It's not a truly pessimistic thing as far as I can tell. It's just gauging it, and it's actually a good meta lesson to learn when you're in a situation that might have the only realistic way of responding to it might be one that you don't readily want to engage with. You don't want to actually consider it. And so but to posit something, because you're like, well, you got to do something. I actually try to have a little fun with it and say, okay, well, this century's not that. It's not. To me, it's a mistake to consider this century any more end-all be-all than any other century. Even if the civilization ends this century, what's the difference between that and 20 centuries from now or 40 centuries from now? It's finite, it's transient, it's going to pass. So I highly recommend taking up a Buddhist principle of embracing impermanence. And then upon that, being like, okay, well, I find myself here. I don't want to be a tourist, and I'd like to have some useful function. Okay, well, here's one. Because those that learn the requisite things that need knowing for the situation they want to operate conducively in, operate most effectively when they're not so inexorably just so emotionally attached to it. And I know there probably is going to be pushback to this, but just hear me out for a moment. That on almost every example of this, whether in sports or music or the arts, you can see example after example of when they've done all the work to get good at understanding their art or their function or whatever it is, whether it's basketball or whatever it is. Once they actually get into execution mode, it's when they're playful with it that they do the best job. And so there's this idea been passed around of, why can't we just treat this like an Avengers initiative, some Justice League task force to just plot out, not necessarily, and I'll explain what I would say would be the appropriate suite of civic work that's most worth doing, but to ask yourself, okay, well, what's worth optimizing for in a situation that might already be a foregone conclusion? Well, here's the last bit of rope, if you can extend it, is if you can allow for any possibility that there's any continuity of our consciousness in any meaningful form beyond our death, beyond our physical life, just for a moment. All right, toy with it for a moment. You've gone this far if you have. Then that's a game changer, and almost regardless of what form it takes, genuinely edifying others a part of, for lack of a better word, their spiritual path in terms of, let's say, developing a contemplative practice, learning how to navigate the dynamics of interpersonal dynamics, say, or family dynamics, or community dynamics, and finding opportunities for growth amidst this kind of time period as opposed to another one, and finding what's theirs to do, what role to play in a situation like this, getting good at existing in the midst of what's going on here, in a way where the growth would, if we continue to exist beyond this life, transcend that and actually contribute meaningfully to a person's larger development. It's basically like an infinite game, like the infinite game. If we exist indefinitely beyond this life, if you successfully got deeper within oneself, or got better at cohering and collaborating with others, or, you know, maintaining a calm, resilient mind amidst difficult times. That's a hell of a skill that probably will last well beyond this life. And so if you can help foster that and others, offer resources and tools to that extent, I think that's the most worthwhile thing to be optimizing for in this time period. And there's a lot of ways of doing that, especially with the powers of AI right now. You could do a lot of really wonderful things for people in an edifying sort of way at scale. And so that's what I would recommend, is seeing how to do that, because there's not a one-size-fits-all for 8 billion people. For one person might be homesteading, one person might be joining a community, for one person might be staying in Game A and taking care of the family and learning what they can. My favorite working model, if there is any cosmology to consider, is that in principle we're neurons in a nervous system of reality. And like an observer observed, like a potter with clay, where we're the witness to reality, and our function at this deepest point is to get better at familiarizing ourselves with the dynamics of the observed world in whatever form that takes. It could be critical thinking skills, it could be understanding the laws of physics or logic or community dynamics or interpersonal dynamics, game theoretic dynamics, but also heart-related stuff, not related to sense-making at all, and tuning into that. And so people that do discover these things don't do it in a vacuum. They usually do it with some help, you know, some resources that they found or a community they found. And so of all the different avenues with which you can foster that, it seems to be the worthwhile thing to do, maybe in any time period, but particularly this one. Because every which way I skin the data that I've seen, it's highly likely a foregone conclusion that it's only a matter of time before the world we know is going to kind of collapse over the next 40 years or so. And I really don't see that as an inherently depressing notion. When you look at it for what it is, that's just the reality of it. And then you say, okay, well, what do I do in that time period? Optimize for edification, so that all things considered, if nothing else, people learn how to operate this, all things considered, as best as they realistically could, in a way that's edifying to them, and they grow and maybe contribute in a meaningful way, and learn unique lessons that may only be afforded to you in a situation like this. It's kind of a unique opportunity. It's not every day you find yourself in a life amidst a civilization that's in decline like this. And maybe something emerges afterwards. It's unlikely that there's no humans a century from now. There might be some remnants that pick up the pieces at the end of all this, when the dust settles. So, sorry for spitballing here, but these are just the things I've been thinking about. You're just not going to outcompete the Game A world that's destroying the planet right now. You're just not going to be able to outcompete them. They've got all the competitive advantages. So I'm not an advocate of straddling Game A to Game B. You can, if you want, go for it. It might be a valuable learning lesson, things you can learn in the course of applying yourself to that. But I'm more an advocate of isolating ways of edifying others and doing that in collaboration with others, so that you have more of a cognitive complexity that's omni-collaborative and better than some of its parts. And in a fun way, like an Avengers initiative. So I'll posit a few things maybe in the description, and if anyone's interested, you can drop me an email. But I won't be available for a while. I'll be at this monastic academy in meditation and working on that for myself for the foreseeable future. So anyway, that's what I got. Hope all's well with you. Take care of yourself. And we'll see where I'm at in a few months.